If you're sitting at your desk wondering whether you should pour a chunk of your budget into a new laptop, you're probably looking for something that will just work day in day out, reliable, easy to live with, and worth the money rather than a list of impressive specs that sound great on paper but might never see the light of day in your workflow. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The problem with a machine that touts a 40-core GPU and an 18-core CPU is that, without a clear picture of how those numbers translate into real-world productivity, you could end up with a powerhouse you never really need, or you could discover after a few weeks that it still can't handle the exact mix of tasks you rely on. That's why today I'm going to walk through the 2026 16-inch Apple MacBook Pro with the M5 Max, a configuration that comes pre-built with a massive 128GB of RAM and a 2TB SSD. I'll break down who actually benefits from that level of hardware, where the value really lies, and the practical trade-offs you should consider before hitting buy. First off, the biggest thing to understand about the M5 Max chip is how Apple's architecture spreads its cores across different workloads. The 18-core CPU is split between performance and efficiency cores, meaning that background tasks like email sync, iCloud backup, or even a music streaming app run on low-power cores, while heavy lifting like compiling large codebases or rendering a 4K video gets handed to the performance cores. In day-to-day use, this translates to a laptop that stays cool and quiet when you're just browsing the web or writing a report, but can instantly sprint when you need to mash through a demanding task. I've heard from several indie developers that the jump from the previous generation 12-core to the 18-core is most noticeable when building multi-module projects that would otherwise take 30+ minutes on a typical workstation. The MacBook shrinks that to under 15 minutes, effectively saving you real calendar time. Now, the 40-core GPU is where the wow factor really shows up, but only if your work actually leans on GPU acceleration. For video editors using Final Cut Pro, the extra cores mean smoother playback of raw 8K footage and a noticeable reduction in render times when applying color grading presets. A motion graphics artist who layers multiple 3D assets in After Effects will see the timeline scrub without stutter, something that can be a serious bottleneck on less powered machines. If you're a photographer who mainly edits JPEGs or Lightroom catalogs, you'll probably never tap into that GPU horsepower, and the extra cost starts to look less justified. Likewise, if your daily routine is dominated by spreadsheets, email, and occasional presentations, the M5 Max is overkill. Storage and memory are where the configurator aspect of this MacBook really shows its intention. 128GB of RAM is an enormous amount for a laptop. Most users will never approach that ceiling, but think about scenarios where you keep a full suite of design applications open: Photoshop, Illustrator, Blender, and a virtual machine running a testing environment all simultaneously. In that case, the massive RAM pool prevents any swapping to the SSD, which can cause hitching or slowdown. In practice, I've seen freelancers who need to run multiple Docker containers for client sites, each with its own memory allocation, benefit from this headroom. The 2TB SSD, meanwhile, provides enough space to store large media libraries locally without resorting to external drives, which is great for professionals who travel frequently and need fast, reliable storage on the go. One subtle but real advantage of the Liquid Retina XDR 16-inch display is its ability to maintain accurate color under both bright office lighting and dim, creative studio environments. The Mini LED technology delivers deep blacks and a peak brightness that can push 1000 nits, which is a practical game-changer if you're grading video or reviewing print-ready proofs. The display also supports a 120Hz refresh rate, meaning UI animations feel buttery smooth, and drag-and-drop actions across large timelines are less jarring. For anyone who spends long hours staring at a screen, this level of visual fidelity can reduce eye strain compared to a standard 60Hz panel. Where the MacBook Pro strengths start to feel like trade-offs is price and portability. The 2026 model with this configuration routinely retails above $8,000, which is a serious investment. If you're a small business owner or a single-person studio, that price point forces you to justify every dollar with a clear productivity gain. The laptop weighs just under 5 pounds, so it's still portable, but the larger 16-inch chassis and the 140W power adapter make it a less frequent travel companion than a 13-inch model would be. You'll also notice that the battery life, while impressive for its class, is shorter when you're tapping into the full GPU. In my testing, editing a half-hour 4K clip drained the battery to 50% after roughly an hour of work, so you'll need to keep the charger handy for long sessions. Another practical consideration is the ecosystem lock-in. Apple's M5 Max runs macOS, which is fantastic for creatives who rely on native apps, but you'll hit a wall if your workflow